So Jacob has already got this little seed of, it's okay to tell a little white lie. Because he's already gone before his father, and he put goat skin, his mother put goat skin on his arms, and around his hands, and around his neck. And he deceives his father to get the blessing. And then Esau comes in, and he wants the blessing. Well, it's kind of hard to give you the blessing of the firstborn if you've already given it to the two second-born. The two second-born, we'll call them. So Rebecca starts saying, I don't like the daughter-in-laws that Esau married. I don't want Jacob to marry girls like this. So I want to send him to my family, to my relatives. So Jacob goes up there, he shows up there, and Rachel comes to the well, and he opens up the well and gives the water to the sheep and all of the good stuff. And he starts working for Laban. And then he says, you know what? I really like that girl, Rachel. I want to marry her. How long do I got to work for you?
7 years.
7 years. And I love how the scripture says that he loved her so much that it was like no time at all. I dated my wife for 3 years before we got married.
Wow. I dated my husband 3 months, and that lasted 47 years.
Well, but you had some different times. There were some different times. But you imagine working for this girl for 7 years, and then they have the wedding feast, and I'm still trying to figure out how they did this, but then I realized that's how they did it. On the wedding night, instead of the bride, the right bride, he sends the other bride, he sends Leah. And apparently Jacob had had a lot of wine. Yeah, I'm thinking the veil. Yeah. So imagine Jacob's surprise the next day. Jacob, the one who stole the birthright. And then he finds out, hey, this isn't the right bride. So he goes back to Laban and he says, oh, just wait a week and then work for me for another 7 years, and then I'll give you Rachel as a wife too. So it's kind of funny because Esau marries 2 women at the age of 40. Jacob winds up marrying 2 women at his age. So it's like, okay, well, they were competing in wives, so, now they both got 2 wives. I thought it was interesting that Jacob winds up getting snookered. Kind of the same way he was snookering other people. Being, John was saying, deceitful. That was Jacob. The beauty of it is God uses imperfect people. Why did God love David so much? He was a man after his own heart. I was thinking about that when Pastor was teaching the other day, and it was talking about everybody was kind of doing their own thing. In the book of Judges, it says that everybody did what was right in their own eyes. But then when it talks about David, it says David was a man after God's own heart. But it said David did what was right in God's eyes. He repented. Yeah, he did make mistakes. He made some big ones, but he repented. When somebody made him realize that he had strayed from God's decision or God's direction, he repented. A lot of people would just double down on that. Kind of like Laban in the next chapter. So Jacob gets sent away. He gets married. He meets Rachel. They get married. But it wasn't Rachel. It was Leah. And it said, and the Bible said, I've heard translations where it says she was weak-eyed. And I'm going, or she had bright eyes, and I don't know if they're saying that she was not as beautiful as Rachel. Rachel was Rachel was totally beautiful. Leah had pretty eyes.
A good personality.
A good personality. I've heard that before. Oh, they got a really good personality. It's like, well, where would you lead with that? Who winds up having more children though?
Leah.
Leah. Leah has 4 children
By Jacob?
by Jacob, yeah. And then they throw in their servants. So Jacob winds up with 4 wives, technically. Ooh, yeah.
Did he have any by Rachel?
Huh?
Did he have any children by Rachel?
He did. What happened to Rachel? Here's her sister, and of course she's the more loved wife. Because, you have a favorite wife, just like you have favorite children. You don't tell your children that you have favorites.
She had 2.
Because you would never have favorite children. She had 2. Who were the 2 that she had? Benjamin?
And Joseph.
Joseph. Why is Joseph so important? Well, that's further down the line. But Joseph's important because basically he saved the nation of Israel and Egypt. And he was mightily used of God. He was a little boastful, a little prideful, but we can go on to that.
Question.
So I think I'm in verse 30 now, and my Bible won't go to the next verse, so that's interesting.
Is he in the next chapter? Chapter 3?
I'm sorry, chapter 30. So he has all these kids. He does a little sneaky thing when it comes to the animals. I'm talking Jacob now. So Jacob's got 4 kids from Leah, 2 from Rachel. I can't remember how many others he had from all the other kids, from all the other wives.
They were concubines, weren't they?
And they're technically, and then he had the half tribes of Manasseh. So he winds up with 12 children.
There's a little village,
10
huh?
children and then 2.
Well, he was mightily blessed of the Lord. He had large flocks, so he probably needed, then instead of going and hiring somebody, you just have another kid. So apparently that's what he was doing.
Wait, that was from one woman? The same?
No, that was like 4 wives.
Okay, I missed that part.
Yeah. Well, it's really bad that I don't know the other 2 wives, but they were the concubines or the servants of Leah and Rachel. So he's got a gaggle of kids. And after working for Laban, they start working this deal where, all the imperfect sheep, all the speckled sheep and all the striped sheep, I'll take and you take all the good ones. And then he does something with the reeds to get the sheep to reproduce. And I do not understand how that works, but it would be really interesting to see a scientific experiment about that. But because he would do it by the water trough where the sheep would come in water. And he did these. So it was it wasn't cheating, but it kind of was cheating.
It was cheating. It was hard. He was cheating.
He was cheating. He was being a little deceitful. But it was Laban, so it's okay. Because Laban got what he was going to do, right? Laban, it's like, work 7 years for my daughter and, get to marry her. Then the wedding is out. Whoops. Surprise. Oh, okay, well, work for another 7 years and you can marry the right one. Because you got to marry the first one. But God blessed Leah. I thought that was really interesting. I love that part where God blesses Leah because, she just wanted to love her husband and do what was right. She got a little questionable later on, but she wound up giving birth to the first 4 children, the firstborn. And Judah is important. Why is Judah important?
Judah, that's where Jesus comes from.
Right. The kings come from the line of Judah. Levites come from the line of Aaron or the Levites. And then if you're in, when we get into, I'm trying to think of the next book, not Exodus, Deuteronomy. They lay out what all the different tribes, how they're standing when they would count. So when they would go out and they would count, they would they would camp according to their tribes. And some of the tribes were in charge of the sanctuary. The mobile tabernacle. Kind of important job.
Just the Levites, right?
The Levites, but then they had sub-tribes and all that, you know.
My chart says that Leah was a mother of 10 sons, not 4.
Yeah, because she gave.
So did they count this, was it 10 sons?
Yeah, Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, and Issachar, and Zebulun. And then Rachel was the mother of Joseph and Benjamin.
So Jacob does a little deceitful stuff, so his herds really start to increase. So then the time comes where, you know what? I'm going to go back to my family. He probably realized that after he had served Laban for all those years, that he wasn't going to be able to really, how do I put it, be free until he left.
Well, the father-in-law was so mean to him.
Well, switching wives with him, yeah, that could be.
Well,
But
another dealing too.
he wound up with a bunch of kids anyways, and that's just a whole fun situation. So he goes back. He decides he's going to secretly leave for Canaan. So imagine that was in verse 31. So he's going to secretly leave for Canaan. Could you imagine? I don't think they lived that close together, but I think he was just going to, well, my father-in-law is not going to be here for a couple days. We'd be looking at the sun and he'd say, my father-in-law is not going to be here for another couple of sunrises. So let's just go back to Canaan. Let's go back to my hometown. So he leaves and Laban finds out and he charges after him. There was another reason why he did that. Was it Rachel the one that took his idols?
Yeah.
So Laban's always got a good excuse for what he does. Firstborn daughter, worked for me 7 years. I'll give you her first. And then work for me for another 7 years. That's 14 years. And then I'll give you the one you really wanted to marry. He didn't make him wait another 7 years though, because I don't think Jacob would have done that. I think Jacob probably would have just taken Rachel at that point and said, yep, we're gone. We're going to run away to Canaan. So he's heading back to Canaan. Now he's running back into another problem. What's the other problem he has in Canaan?
His father.
His brother.
Yeah, his brother.
Remember the one that he stole, did the little fake thing and stole the birthright? He's going back to live around him now. So, let's put it this way. Jacob's between a rock and a hard place. And he probably realizes this on the way back. He's like, Esau has a temper. He might not be forgetting, about the whole situation how I stole his birthright. So I might want to send some presents ahead. So he starts sending people ahead. He was sending his children.
No.
He sent his maidservants and his animals. And these are my lord. So when Esau's coming out, and I'm just imagining, does it say that he actually told him first?
He didn't send them first. He just put them ahead of Rachel,
Right.
Leah, and his children.
Okay, verse 3, it does say he sent messengers before him to Esau. So he's kind of lessening the blow.
And gifts.
And gifts. Always good to send a messenger with gifts. You show up to your neighbor and you say, hey, I'm going to tear down the fence on our line, but here's some cookies. It's basically what he's doing. He's not going to tear down Esau's fence, but he's moving back, and it's like, Esau, don't kill me for stealing your birthright. Lord's blessed me. So as he's sending them all ahead, they're all going. And he meets up with Esau. Family reunion, they're all happy. Esau's not ready to kill him because he stole his birthright. I think that was God, though. That was God putting his blessing upon Jacob. I thought it was interesting that there's not a whole lot about Isaac.
He was very successful.
He was very
Oh,
successful.
I mean, Esau was very successful.
Yes. The Lord blessed Esau, even though he had those two wives from the Hittites that caused much grief to Isaac and Rebekah. That's a line. You gotta watch out who you marry. Always want to have the one that blesses everybody instead of the one that causes grief. So he meets up with Esau. They have a good little get together. He decides not to move close to Esau. And he settles in another area, which is probably pretty wise because probably don't want to be too close. Remember what happened with Abraham and Lot? How their herds and herdsmen would start to argue with each other?
Yeah.
Distance is a good thing, especially when you have lots of herds and all that. You're not fighting over the same wells. You're not fighting over the same food, because it's like, well, my sheep get to drink first. And it's like, well, what about my sheep? So he settles in a different place. Then he meets up, the treacheries of Jacob's son. This is a very interesting one. Because Jacob, and it says Jacob has a daughter, Dinah. I keep saying that wrong. Dinah. And one of the local boys takes an eye to her and more. Basically, he assaults her, right?
Yeah.
But then he makes an agreement that they would become circumcised and they would join the Israelites. They would join, well, not the Israelites, they would join the Jacobites. Jacobites?
The tribe of Jacob.
Tribe of Jacob, thank you. And then two of her brothers decide, while they're all recovering from their procedures, to sneak into their village and kill them all.
Because they raped his sister. Or he did, but supposedly he fell in love with her and wanted to marry her. That's how they got tricked into getting circumcised.
Kind of falls back into the Laban thing, doesn't it? Kind of falls back into that, I think God would have blessed that had that family come in, because that's a big commitment for all that family to say, hey, we want to follow your God. My son loves your daughter. If they're willing to take that further commitment of circumcising themselves and following the Lord, you might want to let them do it. But the brothers decide, nope, we're not going to have any of that. So Jacob is a little worried about that, because that kind of gives you a bad reputation if you say, yeah, follow my God and follow these ways and, do this thing that shows that you are part of our tribe and that you're following the Lord in our way, and we'll be good.
But what's amazing is every single man agreed.
Yeah. That, either they really trusted the chief or the father of the son, or they just thought that was a good idea.
Well, if they're in the middle of the desert with nothing and you have this tribe that comes along, you're like, wow,
Yeah.
we'll have it good. All we have to do is that. Yeah, it's gonna not be fun for a minute, but we'll be taken care of, and we won't have to fend for ourselves like that anymore.
And that is why God blessed Israel even further on, because he wanted them to be an example. He says, if you follow my ways, if you adhere yourself to my teachings, I'm going to bless you. And a lot of it's very interesting if you go through, and when you go through Deuteronomy and you see all these, and Leviticus, and you see all these rules, they practice proper cleansing and proper hygiene before a lot of other people did. Do you know when the Black Plague came along and was wiping out millions of people in Europe and all that, it stayed away from a lot of the Jewish enclaves. Why?
Because of the cleanliness and hygiene practice.
Because of the hygiene that God has established in the book of Leviticus, in the book of Deuteronomy, and the ways that they were supposed to butcher their animals, and the animals that they were supposed to be eating. Do you know that pigs are one of the closest genetic crossovers for humans? And I think,
What are you saying?
well,
What are you saying?
remember the swine flu? It killed millions of people. And the reason they were worried about the swine flu is because the swine flu could jump from a pig to a human. Whereas an avian flu, like the bird flu, cannot jump from the birds to a human.
Has to be airborne.
Well, as well as pigs are so close as well, that they're really filthy.
Right.
The parasites and flukes and worms and pathogens inside of swine,
Yeah.
absolutely, it's putrid.
So God's setting his people up to be successful. He set Jacob up to be successful. So yeah, I think that was part of it. I think that was a very good part of it. That, these people are saying, let's see, should we follow our God, whatever God of the week we have,
Just the two of them killed all of them.
right?
But when you think of the state all these men were in,
Yeah.
major pain, they probably drank to get the pain away.
Drunk a
They're
lot.
probably passed out. And the two brothers were probably very stealth.
Yeah.
Go in each tent, slit their throats, go into the next tent, go into the next tent.
Well, I think of the story of Jonathan and his armor bearer, who took out a garrison of Canaanites or Hittites. I think they were Hittites. And I love the story because they go up to the hill and they go, if the guys say, stay there and we're going to come down and get you, then we'll just run away. But if they say to us, come up here so that we can take care of you, because we'll know the Lord has delivered into our hands. And two guys took out the garrison of the Hittites in that area. So yes, I think they were a product of their father-in-law. They were a product of their father.
Yeah.
They were not adhering to because what would God say? God said that if anybody, because that's the amazing thing. You can become Jewish like that. You can convert to Judaism. If you adhere to the rules, now it's a longer process. But you can become a Christian like that. You can become a Muslim like that. It's not genetic. You don't have to be born into it. That's why it's really interesting that China is killing off all these Muslim followers, the Uyghurs. There's 30 million people there. So they come up with the idea that, let's just force sterilize all their women. And eventually they'll die out.
Yeah.
There's somebody in Germany thought the same idea.
Yeah.
Let's just get rid of all the Jews. And what they don't understand is that the very next day, 5,000 people could decide to become Jewish. Or 5,000 people could decide to become Christians. Because it's a condition of their heart.
People sometimes talk about the Old Testament and it doesn't show Christ, but that is an example of Christ and how God's plan all along was not only for the Jews, but for the Gentiles as well. Because from the very beginning, we see it here, the Gentiles are allowed to come in and be included in the Jewish blessing
Right.
and culture and all of that. And then I was
Only in the New Testament.
Yes.
They were- no, they're-
That's what's happening right now.
Okay, well, here's a great example. When I was in Israel, we're up on Mount Arabel in the Sea of Galilee area. and it was very cold. I think it was snowing, and I had shorts on. So, and as we're praying, we're on top of this, and I think this is the point where they believe that is where Jesus cast out the demons, and they went into the herd of pigs, and then they ran off the cliff. This is the spot that they attributed to that. And as we're sitting there praying, we hear a Muslim call to prayer. There is a village that's at the bottom of this mountain, it's not a mountain like our mountains, but it's a mountain. There's a Muslim village that is in Israel, that's in the Galilee area, and they worship Islam, they're Muslim, but they're Jewish citizens. They're living under the protection of the Jewish state, right? Under the blessings of the Jewish state. And if you've ever seen Galilee,
But they're not Jews.
But they're not Jews. They're Muslims. But they enjoy the blessings of the Jewish state. The protection of the Jewish state. They enjoy the security of the Jewish state. They enjoy the favoritism of the Jewish state. Favoritism, I think of good weather. Utah has got a drought going on right now. Okay? Yeah, if you go to Moab, yes, you always have a drought. Think of the blessing it is that God sends the annual rains.
Oh, yeah.
If you're a farmer, you want those rains.
Yes.
Because if you didn't have those rains, you'd have to irrigate your crops. And it would cost you more money. Or you didn't have the water at all. That's the blessings that God has on Israelite. Later on, when they fell into apostate, what happened? Elijah, 3 years of drought. To make them remember,
Famine.
the rain comes from God. That's a blessing for them. Okay, so Jacob said to the household and all that were with him, "Put away foreign gods, which are among you, and purify yourselves, change your garments, and let us arise and go to Bethel. And I will make an altar there to God, who answered me in the day of my distress, and has been with me for wherever I have gone." So they gave to Jacob all the foreign gods which they had, the rings, and were in their ears. And Jacob hid them under the oak, which is near Shechem. So we should go find just Shechem and dig up those, all that gold that's there. Okay, well, let's go ahead and pray, and we'll let everybody go and get our coffee and our cookies.
Okay, well, you were just talking about lineage, that's all we're trying to clear up.
Right. I was relating back to the things that God has done in the Bible that were amazing, is that for man's sake, Joseph had a lineage back to David. But Mary also had ancestry back to David.
Right.
We're going to pray.
Right.
Lord, we thank you. We thank you for your word. We thank you for your encouragement. We ask that you bless this time, bless this day. Lord, we ask that we would be good witnesses of you and your word. In your holy name. Amen.